It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host. This is our third segment in today's show. We're looking at December 11th. And for the record, there are some meetings that are scheduled on this U.S. Park Service land grab that I want you to make sure that you're attending, including one tonight that's going to be held at the Powder Valley Conservation Nature Center in Kirkwood, Missouri. Now, that's at 6 to 9 p.m., and there is also one in Salem City Hall, and I'm not sure if that particular one is been canceled because of the weather issues, but that one's going to be held from 10 a.m. till noon today in Salem City Hall. So if there's any way that you can get there, please make sure that you do. I will be attending the one tonight at Powder Valley Conservation Nature Center if it's not canceled. And if there's anybody out there that knows that if they are or have not been canceled, please call me and let me know, or text me or something. Let me know what the story is. The truth is that this is a land grab that's being perpetrated on us by the National Park Service, where they're trying to basically control the rivers that the Ozark Scenic National Riverways, and it's a 20-year plan that will not work in our best interest. What they're essentially trying to do is eliminate 65 miles of horse trails. They're trying to block all unauthorized river crossings, which means they'll choose where and when and how you can cross a river. They'll require permits if you want a horseback ride. They're going to eliminate motor vehicle access to the gravel bars. They want to eliminate all ATV, UTV, and four-wheeler use, period. End of argument. There won't be any allowed. They want to eliminate motorboats in some areas and then reduce the power on motorboats in other areas. They say it's backed up by science, but they won't tell us what the empirical evidence is for that science. We're just supposed to trust them. And, in fact, we want to take it one step further. We want to go on the offensive and say, you know what, federal government, just give us the whole doggone scenic river national riverways back. We're just going to control it here domestically in our own state. We don't really need you. Because you come with, what? Strings. You got it. And remember that the federal government's goal is to tie everything back to them in one way, shape, form, or another, so that ultimately they control everything about you. And that leads me to our next topic, which is that the EPA, and if you haven't heard about this, boy, you better get on the stick, because this is ugly stuff. The EPA is proposing new rules that will allow them to take over private property and control all waters of the United States. All waters. Now, if you're a farmer, if you're a rancher, this ought to scare the living heck out of you. They actually have come out and said that this will benefit the economy if the EPA takes over private property. Well, no kidding, it'll benefit the economy of Washington, but it's not going to benefit the economy of your home. They want to extend their regulatory power over all waterways, over all wetlands, and they say that, of course, it will produce economic benefit. Well, let me tell you something. That's communism, socialism, and fascism. When the government owns everything, and you're told when and how and where and if at all you may use it, ladies and gentlemen, our founders told us that if the right for you to own property was ever taken away from you, you would be considered now a subject instead of a citizen, a slave instead of a master. The EPA wants to redefine the following term: waters of the United States. Now, what the current law says, and by the way, it's not a law, it's rules. Rules passed by an extra-constitutional administrative agency that doesn't have any basis for existence in the first place, legally. But the EPA has created these rules that say that all navigable waters are controlled by them. And by navigable waters, we mean, the major rivers, Mississippi River, et cetera, rivers that you can navigate on. But now they want to incorporate and expand that definition to include all, quote, tributaries, regardless of size and flow, and all lakes, ponds, and wetlands within a floodplain. Okay, stop right there. There's your key operative word. Tributaries, regardless of size and flow, lakes, ponds, and wetlands within a floodplain. Do you know that when they tried to do the blueways on us a few months back, the Army Corps of Engineers had just mapped out the brand new floodplain parameters. And in doing so, they expanded the floodplain to include the entire White River Basin. Now, in addition to that, that's what they were basing their blueways takeover on. This makes the blueways look like tiny in scope. This is going to give the EPA control over all water in the United States. If you have a creek on your property, if you have a dry creek on your property, if you have a pond, if you have any kind of wetlands, and by the way, they get to define what a wetland is, not you. You may not even think you have wetlands, but you do. And what they've done is expanded the definition of the floodplain. Now, they don't tell us whether they're considering that to be the 100-year, the 500-year, the 1,000-year floodplain. If you look at floodplain maps, they are created by the Army Corps of Engineers. They determine what a floodplain consists of. And they are marked out by year increments. So you have a 100-year floodplain, a 500-year, and a 1,000-year. And then you have intermediate increments as well. But those are the biggies. Now, the 100-year floodplain says that as close as this place is to a river, you can expect a major flood here every 100 years. A 500-year floodplain dramatically expands the size of that because it says every 500 years, due to geological changes and what have you, you can expect a major flood here. And then the 1,000-year floodplain says that once about every 1,000 years, this area here is going to get flooded, and it's usually a very big area. They want to use the floodplain to determine any tributaries, regardless of size, all lakes, ponds, and wetlands within those floodplains. But they don't tell you which floodplain they're going to use. And if you take a 1,000-year floodplain of the Mississippi River, ladies and gentlemen, it covers all the way from the Rocky Mountains all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Other bodies of water, quote, such as geographically isolated wetlands, would have to be shown on a case-by-case basis to have a significant chemical, physical, or biological effect on large waterways downstream. A major point of concern for environmental groups. So here's what they're saying. Even water that is not, first of all, what they're telling you is that every stream and creek ultimately feeds into a navigable waterway. And so since those creeks, even when they're dry creek beds, since those creeks and ponds and streams all feed into the navigable waterway, they want control of that in order to protect the navigable waterway, which means they can get as far back from the Mississippi as, for crimini's sake, they can get into Kansas, for crying out loud. The truth is, Texas Republican Lamar Smith, here's what he has to say about this. The EPA's draft water rule is a massive power grab of private property across the United States. This could be the largest expansion of EPA regulatory authority ever. If the draft rule is approved, it would allow the EPA to regulate virtually every body of water in the United States, including private and public lakes, ponds, and streams. Wow. This is somebody who's actually in the government who's telling you what they're intending to do. He's raising the alarm. Why is the media quiet about this? What have they been paid or promised? The EPA comes out and says that these claims are false. It's fear-mongering, they say. They're saying that the draft water rule would not expand the EPA or the Army Corps of Engineers' jurisdiction or protect any new water that they have not historically had covered under the Clean Water Act. That's a lie. How do I know that? Because the environmentalists, the radical environmentalists, the extremist environmentalists, these are the people who want to turn Agenda 21, their map of America, into all red. If you've ever looked at an EPA map or in a map of Agenda 21, the goal of the Agenda 21 people is to turn about 70% of America into wildlife habitat in its raw and natural, unhuman contacted state. That means all of us got to go to the cities. Think I'm kidding? Go to my website at America's Voice Now and go take .org and go take a look and pull up some of those maps I've got on there. There's a search bar up there. You can type in Agenda 21 and a bunch of articles will pop up. See, the truth of the matter is, what we're really looking at here is another government agency that is exceeding its authority. In fact, it really doesn't have any authority. I want you to do yourself a favor. I want you to get a pocket constitution. I know you've got one. Somebody's handed you one recently sometime. And if you don't have one, get on the internet and read about it. And if you don't have internet, then go get a copy of one. Go to your library. I don't care. The truth is, if you don't have a copy of your Constitution, you're not doing your constitutional duty because you need to know it. But I want you to find anywhere in that document that gives the government authority to create administrative agencies and delegate the authority that's been given to Congress to pass all laws to some group of unnamed, unelected, no face, no name, completely untouchable bureaucrats. You see, the EPA, you didn't elect. Yet the Constitution says that only Congress may make law. So in order to get around that, the EPA says, well, we're not creating law. We're only creating rules and regulations. Well, okay. Let's play that little game for a moment. So you're going to create rules and regulations. Can I be penalized for failure to follow those rules? The answer is yes. Can I be financially fined? The answer is yes. Can you be imprisoned for failure to follow those rules and regulations? The answer is yes. Can you be taken into a court in order to be held accountable for violating rules and regulations? The answer is yes. The last question I have for you is, do I get a jury trial as required by the Constitution when I do go to an administrative law court? And the answer to that is no. Need I say more? If you don't have the jury trial, which is guaranteed to you by the Constitution, when you're in an administrative law court, and you're held in that court by rules and regulations that are, in fact, actual law, not passed by Congress, but passed by a nameless, faceless bureaucrat under the guise of a law, under the cover, the disguise of law, then, ladies and gentlemen, every administrative agency in the nation, with the exception of 2, has no place in existence. Do you know what those 2 are? I'm going to tell you, but I'll give you 33 seconds to figure it out. Okay. The 2 that are allowed to exist are Border Patrol, because that is a federally delegated job. The Constitution states that the federal government is responsible for protecting our borders. So Border Patrol is a legitimate administrative agency. The second one, and the only other one that has constitutional authority to exist, is the Commerce Department. And the Commerce Department, not like the commerce that you're thinking of, but the Commerce Department has an existence because it is supposed to work with other nations to develop commerce between us and them. And at the same point in time, their job is to make sure that Pennsylvania doesn't charge Ohio a tariff that they don't charge to Virginia, let's say. See, that was the problem originally. They said, well, just because Ohio doesn't like Virginia, or just because Pennsylvania doesn't like Maine, doesn't mean that they get to whack them with a special tax. Now, the truth of the matter is, most of that issue has already been settled. And there's a couple of rules that could resolve that problem, or a few laws that could be passed that would completely eliminate all of those issues. In fact, the Constitution very clearly already resolves them. But the Department of Commerce should exist, if only because constitutionally it's authorized. But it should stay within the boundaries of that which it's supposed to do. Now, they use the Commerce Clause, which is a whole different animal now. That's not the Commerce Department. They use the Commerce Clause to make everything and anything illegal. Do you know that you cannot own a firearm that has passed through interstate commerce if you're a felon? Well, no felon can own a gun, you say. Well, no, that's not entirely true, because the Second Amendment doesn't say that Americans can own firearms except for felons. What it does say is that you have the right to own whatever you want. The federal government, however, by using the Commerce Clause, has stated that anything that transpires in interstate commerce falls under them, which is why felons in possession of a firearm are always charged with federal law, and it's called the 922G. Now, I happen to personally know a guy who was a felon in Florida. From an earlier case when he was in his 20s, he got caught with some drugs. He became a felon. When he was 45, 25 years later, he had a pistol. He lived in Florida. The gun was made in Florida. It was made by Taurus. Taurus is based in Florida. When they caught him with the gun, they couldn't charge him with possession of a firearm under 922G, because that says that a felon cannot own a firearm used or purchased after interstate transit. Guess what? The gun never left the state of Florida, so therefore it didn't traffic in interstate transit. So you know what they did to get him? They got him for the bullets in the gun, not the gun itself. And they gave him a year for every bullet. 10 years. You see, they know that the Constitution and the Second Amendment portion of the Constitution is resolute. They know that it's as hard as granite. And so they have to figure out a way how to get around that. And they did that by utilizing the Commerce Clause. The other clause they use to great consternation and abuse is the General Welfare Clause. And if you want to understand what the General Welfare Clause and the Commerce Clause is meant, you got to understand and read what our founders wrote about that in the Federalist Papers, because those documents actually explained to the population of the country at the time what those two clauses meant. By the way, there's a great website out there that you can go to called federalistpapers.org, and I encourage you strongly to go there. They have a Facebook page too. The Federalist Papers, or federalistpapers.org. It's an excellent site. And they discuss different things about the Federalist Papers. They help draw them into some level of understanding for you. I get it. They're complicated and a little difficult to read sometimes because they were written in the language of our founders, which is not exactly how we speak today. But what you don't realize is that all of this stuff that is perpetrated on us, the EPA, the FCC, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, the Federal Communications Commission, the DHS, right? The FBI, all of these agencies have no constitutional basis for their existence. The Environmental Protection Agency has no constitutional authority to exist at all in any way, shape, or form. And if you read what our founders say about things like that, they are very clear and specific. Any law that is passed that does not comport or align itself with the Constitution has no basis to exist, and it is null and void on its face. That means that all these laws and rules that we fall up underneath and really don't exist, but we agree to play by the rules that they've set anyway. Well, why would you do that? Why would America be willing to submit itself to the Environmental Protection Agency when it has no authority to act on behalf of the federal government or anything else? None. Now, I want clean water. I want air that you can breathe without dying. But we don't need the Environmental Protection Agency, which is full of fraud and abuse and cronyism, and trying to take control of literally the vast majority of private property in the United States of America in order to accomplish that. We don't need that. And we shouldn't be willing to accept that. The EPA is basing this entire concept of being able to, one, take over private property. Let me explain to you how this is going to work. If they get this ruling in place, you've got a creek that runs through your ranch. That creek, according to them, has a nexus, and this is the word they're using, a substantial nexus with a navigable waterway. So therefore, they can now say to you, everything that you do on this property affects that water, which ultimately, by its nexus to navigable water, affects that water. And so you're no longer allowed to run animals on it. You're no longer allowed to farm on it because the pesticides that you use in your farming will run into the water. Or if it's not the pesticides, it'll be the fertilizers. Are you starting to smell how this works? And over a relatively short period of time, they will be able to step in and via eminent domain steal property from Americans. Or make it so worthless that you can do nothing with it. I watched an interview with a guy the other day who's been barred by the EPA from building on a piece of property. They're declaring that it's wetlands and that there's a special animal on there that only lives there. It's a frog. But by their own admission, in order for him to make the property compatible for the frog to live there again, which hasn't been found there in 50 years, he'd have to completely burn all of the trees down on the property. And yet they won't allow him to build on it, and it's not really suitable for the frog until he destroys the property. Go get the dichotomy of that circle. It makes no sense. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about the police state in America and the tyranny of the militarization of the EPA and law enforcement in general.